Hi class, the first thing I'm going to do is show you this video. So watch this. Okay, so that is, let me stop it. That is by Hyder and Simmel. And so what is going on in that video? Chances are you were inferring intentionality, I guess you would say, on those objects. Like, this triangle is ganging up on these other ones and then gets mad. It's just a bunch of random objects moving. But we interpret basically everything in human terms. And so the Hyder and Simmel video is a famous example of how we will give human intentions, human motivations to inanimate objects. We like to see things in human terms. And so we have something called the default mode network, which is a set of interacting brain regions that are active when they're not directed at a task, when we're not intentionally trying to do something. These regions are also active, though, when we are thinking about people. And so our default is basically people terms, thinking about things in people terms. So one study tip for you: if you remember things in people terms, add some sort of connection to a person, an example, a definition, whatever, it will help you recall that information later, since that part of the brain, the default mode network, will be a part of it. One thing connected with social pain. Social pain, by the way, is the sting of rejection, humiliation, or insult. It hurts like physical pain. Social pain feels the same as physical pain. And so, question for you: why do you think that is? Why does physical pain feel like social pain? In evolutionary terms, emotional pain that feels like physical pain makes sure people care when social connections are damaged or at risk. If that sense of isolation feels as important and as immediate of an issue as a broken leg, you're going to address the source of that social pain. You're not going to let that emotional social connection suffer because you don't want the pain to continue. So Eisenberg and Lieberman did an experiment where they had people play three-way cyber ball catch. So they thought they were playing against two other people. There was really only one participant playing against 2 Confederates, but they thought it was 3 participants playing together. And while they were playing this cyberball catch game, they were in an fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging. So they could see what parts of the brain were active while they played this game. And it basically turned into the 2 fake participants, the 2 Confederates, ganging up on the real participant, kind of like monkey in the middle. And the brain of the real participant, the one that was getting excluded, looked the same as if they had given that participant an electric shock or picked them with a pin. It was identical as far as the brain was concerned. Social pain, physical pain, same thing at the neurological level. Another factor sort of with the evolution of thinking, social interactions, is social identity theory. Social identity theory is the idea that our most important memberships feed a sense of belonging and self-worth and shape our thinking about people in and beyond our group. So Tajfel and then Turner came on and added some social cognition components to it, is the one that created this theory, social identity theory. Side note, this is one of the main theories. This and something called social representation theory are the main theories I use in my own research. But this theory basically says we automatically notice, exaggerate differences between groups in people beyond just our group. So your group, the group that you identify with, that's the in-group. The out-group is the people that aren't in your group, the ones you don't identify it with. So you have us versus them, in-group versus out-groups. And you have lots of different in-groups in your life. For example, one is being a McDaniel student. One is what major you have here. There is an in-group for being in this class. You have an in-group if you're a, sophomore or junior. You have all of these different in-groups. They can have different levels of salience at different times. So for example, when you are at practice, your in-group of being on that sports team is going to be salient. Your identity as being a McDaniel student is not going to be highly salient when you're just hanging out on campus. But if you go to say you go to like Cancun for spring break and you see someone in a McDaniel sweatshirt, then your in-group of McDaniel is going to feel very salient in that moment, and you are going to feel connection with that person. It will be us versus them. Hey, you are one of me. We are both McDaniel people, and all these other people aren't. So different things can sort of elevate or decrease the importance of an in-group at any given time, but it's always going to be this us, them, in-group, out-group divide. You like your in-group more. That's the in-group bias. We think our group is better. We think they are more deserving. You also have something called the other race effect. We have trouble distinguishing between the faces of other races. One sort of in-group, out-group divide that a lot of people have is racial. Your race versus people that aren't your race. And so it is, if you are, like, for example, if you are an eyewitness to something and you have to identify someone and the perpetrator is of another race, you are more likely to screw up that identification. You are more likely to get it wrong. We have trouble distinguishing between the faces of other races. Another aspect of it that I don't have on this slide, but I will write it here, is outgroup homogeneity. Outgroup homogeneity is the fact that you think they're all the same. You think your in-group can be very diverse, but you think the outgroup is all very homogeneous, is all the same. So your in-group bias, your group's better than their group. Outgroup homogeneity, they're all the same, but your in-group can have diversity to it. And you also have sort of an evolutionary component to this, is coalition formation. which is when you group individuals into teams. The reason we have the social identity theory is the reason we create in-groups, out-groups is for this coalition formation. If you create a group, then you can share resources. You can protect each other from an outside group. You decide real quickly, are you one of us or are you one of them? Are you someone who's dangerous to me or are you someone that can help me? And so if you can quickly tell the difference between an enemy and an ally, it will help you to survive. And I don't think I have this on a slide, so I'm going to just mention it here. And this is, again, there's all these sorts of in-groups in your life. Another one that seems especially salient right now in our country is political affiliation. So are you progressive or are you conservative? If you are conservative, are you a part of MAGA Nation or are you a never Trumper? If you are progressive, are you a supporter of Bernie Sanders and AOC, or are you a Biden person? That sort of thing. Those are all in groups. And again, different salience. You can be progressive, and if you're in a room full of people in MAGA hats, you are any other progressive in the room, you're going to feel a connection. If you're at like a Democratic rally, then those other in groups of which kind of candidate do you like is going to pop up. But these in-group affiliations are really important. So in one experiment they did, they had liberals and conservatives read proposals for programs, welfare reform programs. And half of them were really generous, which tends to be more associated with progressives. And half of them were more austere, cutting back on social safety nets programs, which is more conservative generally. And then, so that was one dimension. Is it a generous or an austere program? The other dimension is who they thought was proposing the program. Someone who was progressive or someone who was conservative. What mattered more on whether the progressive or conservative participants thought the program sounded good was who proposed it, not what the program actually said. So if it was a progressive participant reading a program about cutting all of these benefits, but they thought it was proposed by a progressive, they liked the proposal. If it was about giving all of these extra benefits, but they thought a conservative had proposed it, they did not like it, even though the general idea of the proposal is something a progressive you think would like. Same thing for the conservative participants. If they thought a progressive proposed cutting back on social welfare programs, they did not like it because it was a progressive saying it. If it was someone they thought was conservative saying, yes, we need to add all of these social welfare programs, then they loved it. Party over principle, basically, or party over policy is the general idea. Your in-group really matters. Next, we are going to talk about central social motives. This is Susan Fisk's research, and I'll stick me up there. Susan Fisk says there are 5 motives that can influence how you act, can motivate you to act. Belonging, understanding others, predicting accurately, control, the need to matter, and trust. So let's go over these. Belonging is your desire for stable, meaningful connections with others. This is why social isolation can be so damaging. If you think about the stories you heard of single people who were isolated during quarantine and how hard it was for them, how difficult social distancing was for some people, that is because of that lack of belonging that they had. So at less extreme levels, social disconnection can lead you to have less emotion regulation and control of your attention or impulses. For example, students who feel rejected by their peers, who don't have that sense of belonging, tend to do worse on tests and tend to act more aggressively. They also tend to eat more junk food. For understanding others, predicting accurately, this is a strong motive to be accurate in how we read and understand people and situations. For example, in one experiment, participants had to play a video game where they had to pick up a rock in the game. If there was a snake under the rock, they got a mild electric shock. For half of the participants, there was a pattern to which rocks had snakes. So they could predict which rocks they picked up that were going to have snakes under them. They still had to pick them up. They couldn't avoid the shocks, but they knew it was coming. For the other half of participants, it was totally random. There was no pattern. They could never predict what was happening. For the participants who could guess, who could accurately predict the situation, even though they were still getting the shocks, they had lower levels of stress than the participants who could never predict what was happening. We want to know what is going to happen. For control, this is feeling we have autonomy and competence to direct our own actions and make things happen. For a couple of experiments connected with this, or examples. So we want to feel like we have control of our lives, basically. In one example I'll do in class sometimes, I'll have everyone write down a number between 1 and 50. And I'll be thinking of a number in my head. And if you write down the number that I am thinking about, you get extra credit on the next test. But before you turn that piece of paper you wrote down your number on, you have to switch papers with another person in the class. And then you put your name on that paper and turn it in. So it's not your guess that determines if you get extra credit. It's somebody else's guess. Technically, you still have the exact same chance of getting the extra credit. But students hate it. You want it to be your number that determines if you get the extra credit. You want control over that situation. Another example, they did something similar to that, but it was letting people either choose their own numbers for a lottery ticket, or they had to get the random lottery numbers. And then half of the time they had to switch lottery tickets with someone else. If it was just a random lottery ticket they got, they were fine switching. If it was numbers they had chosen, though, they really didn't want to give it up. They really didn't want to switch with someone else, even though, again, their chance of winning the lottery did not decrease when they switched numbers, but it's no longer their numbers. For need to matter, this is the need to feel that you're worthy, you have social status in your community, and you have a positive reputation. This is the basis for a lot of self-enhancement, self-improvement type stuff that people will do. This also is the basis for, you can look at a couple of these. For example, during the 2016 presidential election, Hillary Clinton talked about the deplorables. So there's, 3% or something of the population who are just deplorable. You're never going to reach them. And so the people who identified as that sort of became a rallying cry. Like, you don't think I matter. I'm going to take this as a badge of honor. I'm fighting against you calling me a deplorable. Sort of the same thing happened in reverse when Trump called Clinton a nasty woman in the debate, and it became this whole thing. You could buy nasty women t-shirts, and it sort of became a rallying cry, like, you don't think I matter, you think I'm a horrible person, I'm going to prove you wrong. You can also see this, like, for example, the basis of the Black Lives Matter movement. It is, we matter too. You need to care about us. Our lives matter just like everyone else's. That the basis, the social motive for creating BLM was this need to matter. And then finally, trust. This is when you want to feel others will ensure your safety, treat you with kindness, provide you with resources. This is the basis partly for something we'll talk about later on this semester, which is blaming the victim. We tend to, and just world thinking, we tend to think the world is fair. We want to think the world is fair, that good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people. And so if something bad happens to someone, we want to blame them for it because we want to think that other people are going to be kind to us. We don't want to think bad things are going to randomly happen to us. So you have these 5 social motives. And let me fix this, hold on. And Krugalinsky used these motives to study why people from stable homes would join a terrorist organization, why they would become terrorists. And so looking at these motives, you have the desire to belong. The group provides identity and a purpose. There is certainty connected with it. It's that black and white dogma, the order of the organization. You have this strong need to matter. And so if you become a martyr, if you're fighting for a cause that is giving you this community, this need to matter. We think if we look out for the other people in this organization, they're going to take care of us. It'll be a safe place to be. So you can look at these motives for why people would join. And so using these motives, the Aarhus model was used in Denmark to try to get kids out of terror groups. So Denmark had back in, oh gosh, when was this? The Aarhus model started in 2007. And so this was teens in Denmark, usually first generation immigrants, who were joining ISIS. And so they started this Aarhus model that focused on inclusion to prevent kids from getting radicalized, or if they did go to the terrorist group, to de-radicalize, get them out of it and de-radicalize them. So again, when this program started, Denmark had the second highest number of jihadist fighters after Belgium. And this program involved individualized counseling for youths who were at risk of radicalization. They were provided mentors who had been de-radicalized themselves. They had mandatory self-help groups for the parents of these at-risk youths to create a network to help disillusion the teens to the jihadist ideas. And return fighters who had not been convicted of war crimes were given the opportunity of counseling to become mentors themselves rather than prison in Denmark. So focusing on these social motives, we're going to help you feel like you belong, that you have a purpose, so you don't have to run off and become a jihadist. And it worked. So, for example, in 2013, 30 Danes went to Syria to fight. Only 2 went in 2014 and only 1 in 2015. So they were able to significantly decrease the number of teens who were joining ISIS by using this Aarhus model. And so I'm going to stop there for today, or for this video. The next one might be slightly long, but this is a good place to stop. The next one will start with the context on social judgment.